All right, now let's explore some of the recent happenings or data that we've had in the economy in recent times and see the perspective of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. We have here in the studio the Chief Economist, Dr. Shegun Omishakin, right here. Dr. Omishakin, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we've had a very busy week. Last couple of weeks, we've had the rebased GDP, we've had inflation, we've had MPC, and we know, of course, NESG is always watching and talking, about some of these things. I think the latest I would like for you to comment on would be the GDP, rebased GDP from 2019. We see we grow the first quarter, but I guess one of the most interesting findings from that is what real estate has done. Even though we've been warned that we shouldn't get too excited, because even though real estate, the value or the volume contributed to the GDP is higher than oil, we still need oil as our mainstay. So help us to balance all of this perspective.
Yeah, so let's start from the essence of rebasing. As you said, we've been on this journey for a very long time, and we must also credit the MBS for finally, releasing the long-awaited data. And yes, we have some insights regarding what we have seen. But I think on the macro level, what we've seen is an economy that is showing some level of robustness in terms of different activities across sectors. We've also seen an economy that could have been more, the prospect could have been more enhanced, if not because we've been having some challenges with our FX. So if you look at it in terms of the naira value, we are encouraged. But if you go back to the value in terms of the global measurements, we are not still doing as it were fine. But stability is established across sectors. Remember this year, January, we started the idea of the government concentrating on stabilizing the macro environment, at least for the next 2 years, so that after that we can then move from stabilization to consolidation and then acceleration. I think the major indicators we received from the latest rebase is that indeed the Nigerian economy has to some extent achieved that general stability across board. Yes, you've seen some sectors not performing, as expected, especially the oil and gas. But again, if you compare the current performance with what we've had so far, you see signs of stability. We're still having challenges in the sectors, but still, we've seen the sector that is now becoming a little bit, we are experiencing some level of deepening, especially going to the side of the role of Dangote refineries in terms of the importations and the but I think a lot needs to be done when it comes to the deepening of the sector, the oil and gas sector itself. So above all, I think it's a good news, but the main challenge we've always been talking about is still how inclusive the economy is. How do we feel the economy on the road? I think that's just the major challenge that the current reform should be looking into.
So I hear two things. I hear you talk about deepening the oil and gas sector. Comparing that to our efforts to diversify the economy, seeing that services is the one that had a higher part now, yeah. I thought we should be celebrating that.
Yeah, we should. Actually, I think anything that brings us closer to our dream, we should celebrate it. While we'll answer the question of how sustainable this will be without the role of oil and gas, that's a valid question. But anything that pushes us into deepening the activities along sectors, increasing our GDP every time, then I think we should be celebrating that. Service sectors have been playing very, tremendous role over the years. So I don't see why suddenly oil and gas will, just overtake service sector. But oil and gas should be the foundation that, triggers every other sector. We talk about industrialization. You cannot achieve that without the oil and gas sector. You talk about inclusive growth. You can't. So oil and gas is a major sector that we need to concentrate on. But again, all other sectors are doing fine. So let's see how we move from here to where we desire to be, maybe at the end of the year.
Maybe. And then you also, another thing that pops out from the rebased GDP is informal sector.
Yeah.
We saw that the MBS gave a lot of attention to that because we've been talking about how a major part of the economy is in the informal sector, and so we miss out on taxes, miss out on even the size of the economy because it's in the informal sector.
Yeah, and that's why, as I said, debates and the government's focus on inclusive development and growth is very important. As in, the recent data shows that you'll be right if you refer to the Nigerian economy as highly informal economy. And that means that it will be very tough to see reforms penetrating people, as in having strong impact on people. Informality is not just about the activities we are recording. It's also it also speaks to how efficient government's policy reforms will easily get to people. High informal sector or informal economy will have people at the lower base, millions of them who will not be reached. So when you have lower set of informality or smaller set of informality, then you can see that government can easily reach them. So I think that's the current challenge, whether in terms of the employment, jobs, activities, and so many other things. The current database has shown to us that we have more to do with formalizing the informal sector or making the informal sector to be more functional, as it were, in the current state. But again, as I said, let's see where we go from here.
And I guess that's why recently the conversation has been, yes, we have encouraging macroeconomic data, but the micro scenario hasn't caught up with that.
Yeah. Yeah, again, how do we, and the role of informal sector, as I said, is not just us looking at the activities that are going on. There's also looking at how do we capture the activities for policy purpose. How do we know number of people who are working here, number of people who need this? And you also see the implication of this during the recent subsidy removal reform. We all know it was a good move. It was the right policy. But because of the size of the economy that is, that moves towards informality, you have huge costs of trade-off. And that is the meaning. So, for instance, now you've removed the subsidy. How do we make sure that people at the lower level are not suffering for it? How do we do all those whatever data? So we don't have the data. You can't transfer wealth. You can't transfer money or any other thing. Help people at that side because the population is huge. And that's why I think it's also very good, and we need to commend the MBS for coming up with the role of informal sector in the Nigerian economy. Over time, I want to see a situation where we have what you have referred to as micro data, micro signal insights, complementing the macro information and indicators that we'll talk about. And that means that we are moving from just looking at the economy itself into a more inclusive economy. That emphasizes inclusion, having the ability to measure what goes on beyond the macro level. That is the simple meaning of inclusion, because if you cannot measure it, you cannot impact it. And I think that's what the path the MBS maybe have decided to go, to look at what happens more beyond the macro headlines.
Well, I want to ask, do we need to formalize our informal sector for us to have a more robust economy, or for the policies and the benefits of the reform to be able to, as you said, be inclusive? Is there a need to formalize the informal sector, or can we just leave them as an informal sector but give them attention and find ways to drive down the benefits to them?
That's formalizing. Formalizing isn't just about collecting taxes from them or making sure that they are registered, as it were. The essence of formalizing is access. How do we know we have these businesses or business activities? How do we know they exist? Getting closer. And there is no way you can get closer if you don't break the barrier between you and those operators. When I say you, I mean the government. And one of the ways to do that is to recognize them, whether you call it formalizing it, whether you call it collecting taxes, I don't know, but recognizing that they do exist. One, and when you recognize them, you will also want to increase their role in terms of collecting data. Now you collect data from the known formal businesses, companies, you know. You also want to include them by looking at what they do. And there is no way a government can contact an informal activities or informal operators to collect data or to know what they are doing when you don't have their name register with you. So it will also mean that where you encourage CAC registration, it means that you encourage maybe you lower the taxes, and I think the current tax law has also answered so many questions along informal sector. But whatever you call it, formalizing them or not, there is a need for us to concentrate more on that sector. It's not just about the business activities or operators, it's also about the workers, people that are there. As the data reveals, more than 90% of the Nigerian workers operate in that sector. So if you have more than 90% of the Nigerian population operating in a sector you know nothing about, tell me how reforms will be sustainable. Tell me how reforms will be efficient. And I think that is what we are experiencing now. Reform can have a good macro outlook, but when it doesn't come down to that level of impact, people might likely want to say it doesn't make any sense. But ordinarily, it does.
So let's believe that since the NBS has started giving attention to the informal sector, collecting data, I think they also have the household survey through which they are reaching out to the informal sector and all of that. Perhaps slowly but surely, we will get them formalized one way or the other.
Yes.
And then also with what the tax reform is supposed to bring into the scene from next year, that will encourage more of them to get registered. So perhaps we would have more.
Yeah, and perhaps it will also help the government in the process of designing reforms to be informal focused. Globally, there are informal sectors everywhere, even in the US, most developed countries in the world, you have them. There are significant size of informality. India, China, everywhere. But I think what the government, formalizing them will also help is to be able to design reforms that can easily reach the informal sector, or that the informal sector will easily understand, so that we don't look at the whole economy like macro, two sectors, these are sector, oil and gas, this and this and this. No, you also have the insights and the intelligence as government to reach out to those sectors, at least to reach out to those people, 90% of the Nigerian workers who are in this sector.
You cannot ignore, you can't ignore 90%.
No, it's like the whole Nigeria. When we say 90%, it's like saying we are all the informal sector.
Yeah, Well, another interesting thing in the country now is the tax reform, which you've referred to. Supposed to start implementation by January and all of that. And what comes with that, apart from the exciting things, the exemption for small businesses and employees, is that it should bring in more revenue to the subnationals. Now, you've talked about the reforms. A major one is the subsidy removal. We've seen how that has increased revenue, FAC, especially to the subnationals. And the conversation is, so we will go to this journey again, and hopefully we're going to see more revenue, because the tax net will increase and all of that. And then we'll see even more revenue to the government, especially the subnationals. Who's holding them accountable? What are they using it for? Because if we're talking about inclusive development, it should start from the local governments are part of the FAC. Local government, state government, before we come to the federal government.
I think yes, you are right. First of all, the bill, the law now, in itself is not an end. It's not something that you've done. I think it helps us to gain some significant level of clarity as to what resources the Nigerian economy is leaving untouched in terms of the revenue to government and so many other things. But I think after that, it also identifies the role of implementation and monitoring. I believe so strongly that when people know how much their states are receiving, how much their local governments are receiving, maybe conversations over time will begin to shift from just looking at the role of the federal government, the president, ministers, to that of states. But it's still a collective work beyond the law they have. It's a collective role for every one of us to then know that, yes, this is my state, this is how much we are having, so how much of the development are we really experiencing.
But are the people looking at it? Do people care enough? It seems people are just, a lot of Nigerians are just concerned with, can I just go out there, hustle, and get food for my tummy and roof over my head? And so that leaves a lot of unaccountability, there, especially from the local government, because they are close to us. So they should have a lot of such lights on them. But it seems Nigerians we've given up. Giving up on government, and just let me just do my thing and live my life in peace.
Yeah, yes, I understand the sentiment, but again, you have institutions, you have groups,
NGOs,
and
CSOs.
you all know the role of NESG in this conversation. We don't give up. We may feel like, but we don't. For instance, this year we are hosting another summit, and it looks at some of the key points we have raised now. The link between sustaining the reforms we have started with, prosperous Nigeria or development, and then the role of inclusive growth. When you bring these three together, you understand that there is a need to have a more efficient policy reforms and implementation, and that is what we are dedicating this year's theme on. So it's when it feels like people should give up that I think that we need to rise up.
And I think
again.
you're also looking at the subnationals.
Yes,
I think we should begin to have more conversations around the subnationals.
Yeah, so we're having a whole day to have a conversation around subnationals. The governors will be there. And when we say subnationals, we are not just talking about how much these states are receiving. We are also talking about the opportunities, the economic, the integration, and the link with the federal government. Are there laws that may want to improve performance of a sector or a state that we need to look into? It's a lot of conversation around seeing Nigeria a far better economy by year 2030.
All right, we wish you the best in your summit. And
Thank you.
Well, I guess from this side, the media side, we're going to have to push in more.
Yeah, please do.
More light on the subnationals.
We'll be expecting you as usual.
Okay,
November 6 to 8.
I know,
October,
right?
rather, 6 to 8.
October, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Segun Mishakin, Chief Economist with Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Thank you for your time and views.
Thank you.